What is Damus? Damus is an iOS app. It allows you to use the Nostr network. You may have heard of Nostr, but if you haven't, I'll link to my other video where I explain what that is. Damus is probably the very best Nostr client so far. It's an iOS app and it's currently in test flight. And it lets you access the Nostr network. It's a type of a social media tool, almost like Twitter, but it has some very special properties that make it different, and we want to talk about those. So first, let's take a look at the Damus app. To get it today, you need to be on the test flight. That's a pre-production app. It's not in the App Store yet. You can only get it on test flight. But you can see here what the Damus app looks like. Once you've got the test flight installed, then you can actually open the Damus app. You can see the icon right there. And when you open it, this is a fresh install, so we'll look at what that looks like. From a fresh install of Damus, you can see it says, "Welcome to the social network you control." You can either create an account or log in. From here, you can see some of the features of Damus. It's encrypted end-to-end private messaging. Keep big tech out of your DMs. It's private, so creating an account doesn't require a phone number, an email, or a name. And you get started right away with zero friction. And it says earn money, so you can tip your friends' posts and stack sats with Bitcoin, the native currency of the internet. Now, you don't have to care about Bitcoin or use Bitcoin to use Damus, but the guy who made Damus likes Bitcoin, so he decided to put those features in. But it actually demonstrates something that's pretty interesting to understand around how Damus and Nostr work. The application inside, it'll look and feel a lot like Twitter, but it's actually nothing like Twitter in how it's built. And what it is it's built in a way that lets it open up. Anybody who wants could build a client like this, like Damus, or you could make your own favorite. And the people that you are going to meet on the app are not necessarily using the app because they're using the Nostr network. So we'll create an account, and then I'll show you how that works. Now, creating an account is a little bit different than what you might expect from a social media app, because normally when you create an account, you're expecting to maybe upload a profile photo, maybe choose a username that's unique on that network, then choose a password. That's not the case in Damus. Damus is written for Nostr, and Nostr works in a little bit of a different way. So let's look at that. So we're going to tap Create Account. And here you can see this looks kind of like a traditional social networking profile setup. There's some key distinctions, though, and we'll get into that. First, for the username. You can choose any username you want. This doesn't even have to be unique across Damus, because Damus is just accessing Nostr, and Nostr itself doesn't really care what username you choose here. We can pick whatever name we want. I'm going to pick the name DK, because that's a handle that I use on a lot of social networks. And I'm going to list the display name as David King. And then I'm going to write the about is curiousdk.com because that's my website. And then you can see here, there's this account ID and it begins with NPUB. So that's a Nostr public key. That's sort of like a username that's unique across the world. Anybody using Nostr has to have a unique account ID. You don't have to have a unique username. Now we're going to create that account with that unique ID. Now it says before we get started, you'll need to save your account info, otherwise you won't be able to log in. Here's the public key. A public key is similar to a username, but you would never want to have to remember that or hand it to somebody. It's made easy so you can just copy it. Now here is a private key. I'm going to show you this private key because this is like a throwaway account. I'm not actually going to use this account. I'm just using this to demonstrate how setup works. The private key is similar to a password on a social network. Now the difference here with a private key, you can actually use this same password with any client. So it works with Damus, but it also works with any other client that's built for Nostr. For some reason, Damus doesn't like you. They don't want to support your account anymore. That's all right. You can go off and use it with some other client. You can use it on the web, or somebody will build other iOS clients or other Android clients that make it easy for you to still use the network, even if Damus doesn't allow it in the future. But for now, let's take a look at that private key. You can see it begins with NSEC, meaning keep this one secure, this one's private. And they recommend putting it into a password manager, so they make it really easy to copy. Inside a password manager, now the way I like to manage it for my Nostr account is, this is how I manage a Nostr account in my 1Password. You can see that I actually don't list a username, and I keep a password here, and the password here that I keep is my NSEC string, but it's unique to me, and I need to keep it secret, so I can't show you my real one. So you want to save your public key, which is like your username, and you want to save your private key, which is like your password. Save your password in your password manager. You can store your public key in a note file somewhere. You could actually share your public key out on Twitter. Your public key is how people can connect with you on Nostr. Anybody who has your public key can find you and follow you on any client that uses Nostr. And Damus is one of the clients. Now we're going to tap Let's Go and see what the Damus experience looks like. So now it's loading a bunch of messages. All of these messages are coming from Damus. That's because by default, I'm just following Damus. So this is that new account I just made up. And I can see that I'm following Damus and I'm following DK, which is this account I just made up. Now, an interesting thing to note here is that I have two people that I'm following, and then followers doesn't show the total number of followers, but it shows a download which means it's going to go out to the network and try to find where I have followers. Because my followers don't live on Damus, remember. My followers live on Nostr. And I guess there's one follower, which is me. Now, the other bit that you might not be familiar with is this shows relays. So what does it mean to have 7 relays? Well, let's tap on that and take a look. A relay specifies a place where you can go for messages to be sent and where you want to read messages. And you can see in this case, we're using 7 relays. That means if you think about this as a Twitter-like service, if I were to publish a message, if I were to broadcast a tweet or a note in the case of Nostr, those would get sent to all 7 of these relays. And then anybody else who wants to follow me or who knows my public key can use that public key to find me, follow me, and pull down messages from those relays. Now, because I have my private key, I'm signing those messages and people can verifiably know that I wrote those messages or whoever had access to that private key wrote those messages. Now, if you go into settings here, you can see this is where the relays are shown, and I could add new relays here. So if I know of a relay, maybe you're running one yourself. You could even run your own relay for Nostr in your own home. It can relay and send all your messages. Any of your friends can notice which relays you're using and they can pull down messages from those relays. You can see they are all green now, so it looks like they're all connecting well. And you can see I have access to my public account here. And you can see I can access my public account ID again. So if I want, I can copy it. And again, might broadcast it out to Twitter to let people know where they can find me on Nostr. And now we're just looking at all of the notes, which are kind of like tweets, but we're looking at all the notes that the account called Damus has sent out. That's one of the accounts I'm following. Bunch of useful stuff. You can see that they all basically look kind of like tweets, but the difference is Damus doesn't control any of this data. The data lives with the relays. Now I'm going on this other icon, that's the global feed. In the global feed, you can see that there's other people who are writing things. So EZO Fox in this example wrote something 1 minute ago. There's a guy named Matt who just posted something here. These are all just people who are publishing to Nostr. Now, these people are not necessarily using Damus. It's interesting to note, I have to keep reminding myself this because I'm using Damus and it feels like I'm using Twitter. It feels like everybody else using this is also using Damus, but that's not the case. People who I'm reading things from here may be using Damus, but they might also be using some other app. So imagine if you could use Twitter and people who are using Snapchat could read your tweets and you could see the snaps that they made on Twitter. That kind of interoperability is what we're talking about here. So here's William Kasarin. He's the guy who made the Damus app. Now on Nostr, here I decided to call myself DK, but there's other people called DK, so that's not unique. So here's an example. This says Kameri, and it's WLVS.space, and he's Kameri at stacker.news. Here's what Will looks like on Damus, and he has his NIP05 verification of jb55.com. So he controls that domain, and that domain is what's unique. And then here's a shout out to FiatJoff, and he's using fiatjoff.com. FiatJoff is the guy who created the Nostr protocol. Remember, again, the protocol of Nostr is different from the application of Damus. Damus is one application on the Nostr protocol, but other people can write applications on the Nostr protocol too. So this is just one example. Now I'm going to go to settings here, and I'm going to go toward log out. But before I log out, it's going to remind me that I should be storing the NSEC account key, because if I don't, there's no way I can get it back. They can't do a password reset because they don't control a password. The only thing I have is this unique character string, and I have to safeguard it for myself. And now I'm going to log in. Upon logging in, I'll show you my real account. So here's my real account. This is me. You can see I'm DK, and I have a purple thing that says stacker.news because stacker.news is a service that I used to verify my identity for NIP05. You can see I'm following 207 people, and some of those you might recognize, like Damas, of course, myself, JB55, Moneyball Jack. And here I am just, talking, having conversations, posting things. Sometimes people reply to me. So it feels a lot like Twitter. But for example, this individual, Surf, may be using Damus, but may not. Doesn't really matter. Instead of likes, we do shaka. You can do what's called boost, which is a lot like a retweet, and you can reply. What's cool is when you reply too, you're just writing any note you want. Nostr is not limited to 140 characters or 280 characters. You can leave much longer notes. And so what I did here is I copied the Wikipedia article, first little bit of the Wikipedia article for William Shakespeare, and you can see I could post this right here and it'd be no problem. If you want to post an image to Nostr, I'd recommend you have to find a place that's going to host the image, because right now Nostr is not going to host the image for you. One way to go about that is there's a website called nostr.build. It's an image uploader, so we can choose a file here, and we're going to upload that file. Now that's going to be hosted on nostr.build. That's a beautiful winter scene. We're going to grab that. I'm going to go here and show you making a YouTube video to demo Damas. I'm showing people how to share an image and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to post that image, and when I hit post, you can see that image is now visible to everybody. So also can broadcast an image here. If somebody likes a note that I wrote, they can go over here. You see this little lightning icon, and they can tap that and choose an app that they use for Bitcoin, and they can actually send me a tip. Up at the top, you see copy invoice. It says LN URL. That's actually a special sequence of information that uniquely identifies me so that people can send me tips if they want. And when they send me tips like that, they're just sending me like little tiny amounts of Bitcoin. They could send me like a penny worth of Bitcoin or less even. But what's cool is they don't have to be using Damas, and we don't have to be using any type of third-party custodian. We don't have to be using a bank. We don't even have to be using a crypto exchange. This money we could hold totally separate from those sources, and we can send it back and forth to each other when we contribute or add value. So that's a very cool thing. There's also DMs. In DMs, you're encrypting messages, but otherwise it works very similar to the way Twitter works. And you have a notifications tab that also shows like when people do things like boost your notes or people respond to you or reply, you see those in your notifications tab. So that's a basic walkthrough. I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to make a follow-up video to help explain some more. So let me know what your questions are in the comments, and let's get on this.